Hey runners, before we get into today's episode, I want to ask you a quick question. Have you ever wondered if your nutrition is actually helping your running or is it actually holding you back? If you want to find out, I've created a brand new free resource just for you. It's called the Runner's Fueling Audit. It's a super quick checklist that's going to help you spot the signs of underfueling, low energy availability, or where the gaps in your nutrition might be that are impacting your recovery and actually slowing you down. It only takes a few minutes to go through, and by the end, you're going to know whether or not your fueling is on the right track, or if you really need to start making some changes to the way you approach your eating so you can start to feel stronger on every run, reduce your injury risk, and actually get the results that you're training so hard for. You can grab your free copy right now by clicking on the link in the show notes. Again, this is called the Runner's Fueling Audit. It's a free downloadable resource, and it's going to give you so much clarity on how you can start feeling smarter and running stronger. All right, let's dive into today's episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Natchek, and today we are here to talk about what to do after your big race. So I'm walking you through all of the steps of what I want you to do, basically from the moment you cross the finish line, provided you cross the finish line. We're going to talk about that too, what to do if you do not happen to finish the race that you sign up for, all the way through to conducting a race debrief session. So how to go through that entire process of really reflecting on the journey of that race from start to finish, walking through the training cycle, being prepared going into the training cycle, what went well, maybe what didn't go well, what challenges, barriers came up along the way, what things you executed to plan and what you didn't, and if you didn't, why you didn't, and just really digging deep and peeling back the layers of everything that goes into getting to the start line of your event so that you can see, celebrate your successes, celebrate yourself and the things that did go well, but also see where is there opportunity for improvement and where are there things that maybe we can do a little bit differently to continue to make progress and push us forward for our next event so we can reach our big long-term running goals at some point. Because if you're a runner, and I meet so many runners like this who have been doing the same thing for many years, many training cycles, and are not making progress. So not getting faster, not getting stronger, kind of staying stuck in the same performance running rut. And until we really start to break down all of these different aspects and steps in the whole process, it sometimes can be hard to really identify like what needs shifting and what needs changing in order for us to really start to move forward. Maybe there's a training aspect to it, right? Maybe it all comes down to that we're not doing the right type of training for the race, the goal we have for a particular race, right? We're never going to get faster if we don't do specific workouts that are built around getting faster. Maybe we need to run more miles, right? Maybe we need more volume as part of our plan. Maybe we're stuck in our volume, in our ability to train hard, in our recovery and all of those things because our nutrition is really lacking or our recovery practices are really lacking, right? There's a lot of things during a training cycle that can be holding us back. There's also a lot of things in terms of our actual race execution, whether that's things like carb loading, intra-run fuel and hydration, our pacing strategy, our mental strategies, our gear, all of these different things that perhaps there's something there that we can adjust, fix, improve upon so that we can continue to build and make progress in the long run. And I think this is really important because we don't want to start to lose the joy of running. And it isn't always about a PR, right? I want to make that really, really clear here that your big running goals, your progress may not be faster times or may not only be about faster times, right? A very reasonable goal for a race, if you're, say, an injury-prone runner, might be making it through an entire training cycle without an injury. Getting to the start line of a race healthy in top form, right? Now, chances are, if you could make it through a training cycle without getting injured, it might end up being a faster race than races you've run previously. But, right, like that's not the point. The point is changing our strategy, adjusting what we're doing with our training so that we can get through that training cycle and feel really confident when we get to the start line of that race. Or maybe for someone else, it might be, I really want to fuel and hydrate myself properly during this race. And so if it means that I have to slow down a little bit to take in my fuel, if it means that I have to, hold back, stop, take a quick break at water stations to get in more fluids during, right? Like those might add a few minutes of time overall, right? But in the long term, like for that race, it might help you finish stronger or maybe go from not finishing to finishing. I had a client that I was working with earlier this year who at a previous race a couple years prior to us working together, she ended up having a DNF during her marathon because it was extremely hot out on that particular day and she did not have enough water. She got very dehydrated. She ended up not being able to finish. So part of our work together was a hydration strategy, right? She was a very experienced, very talented runner. So it was like, of course we had a training plan for her. We were doing, race specific stuff for her big goal of qualifying for Boston. But the more important work, that we were doing together along the way was helping her understand her hydration needs and making sure that she had a plan and a system for staying hydrated so she could put in the performance that she ultimately was really capable of. I have a really good friend of mine, who is also a runner and has done many half marathons over the years. And her and I were having a conversation earlier this year where she mentioned, really struggling and being frustrated with having the same kind of old injuries coming up every half marathon training cycle. It was never enough to, I mean, maybe you had in the past, but in the time that I've known her, it was never enough for her to not be able to do the race, right? She had always been able to show up on race day and get through, but it definitely held her back with her training. It definitely held her back during the races. She would note, oh, this, my ankle, my hip, these different things would start to bother her. And I asked her, oh, like what training plans are you using? And she told me, and it's a training plan from a very popular source, right? Like these are training plans. Like she didn't just get them from some random blog somewhere, and there's nothing behind it. She didn't use Chat GPT or something to get these training plans. Like these are supposed to be really good quality plans, so it makes sense that she would be using them and thinking that she is the problem, right? And assuming that there's something wrong or different or whatever about her as a runner versus the training plan. So anyway, I said to her, maybe you need a different plan, right? Like if every time you've run a half marathon, you've used that same training plan and you always end up hurt at like around the same mileage, right? You get to kind of the same distance and all of a sudden you're having the same issue every single time. Like maybe you need a different plan. And she kind of laughed because I guess it never really occurred to her before. And, she's like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe. So anyway, of course, I am a running coach. And so we sat down together and created a plan for her for the half marathon she ran earlier this year. And it was amazing to see like that she was able to get to that race injury free. Like she did not have any issues at all with injuries throughout that entire training cycle, following a different strategy and a different plan. And also that, she had a really strong, really solid half marathon and now is training for a full, and has gotten so far beyond the mileage and the distances that she was running in all of her previous training cycles, again, without getting hurt. And it's just a shift in, how she was training, a shift in what she was doing that really made the difference. Anyway, I want to tell you those stories because if you are a runner who's listening to this and you've been kind of doing the same thing year after year, season after season, and you're thinking that like there's something wrong with you, there probably isn't. There's just something about what you're doing, something about the approach, something about the plan you're following, the diet you're following, the people that you're following and using the resources for that just aren't for you and just aren't working for you, right? And not to say those other plans that my friend had, they've probably worked for thousands and thousands and thousands of runners. They've probably been great plans and tried, tested, and true for lots of people. They just weren't right for her. And so what we want to do after a big race is to do this debrief and kind of walk through all of these different things that go into getting us prepared to run that race so we can see, okay, for next time, what do I want to do differently and where do I need help? Okay, so let's back up a little bit. So, what to do after your big race? The first thing that I absolutely need you to do, no matter what, I don't care. Don't care how the race went. I don't care if you didn't finish. I don't care if you didn't finish the race, right? The first thing that I need you to do is I need you to celebrate. And I need you to celebrate what you've done and what you've accomplished, getting even just to the start line of that race. We've all had very bad races, right? Like, and I know maybe we should never like call it bad. I don't know. Maybe we should use a more positive terminology, but we've all had races that did not go to plan. And maybe we knew going into the race that it was not going to be our day. Maybe we had a lot of things come up during that training cycle that made it that it wasn't going to be our day. Or maybe we went into that race thinking maybe it was going to be our day. And we were really going into it with high hopes and a plan and a strategy to maybe get a PR or a Boston qualifying time or something like that. And it doesn't happen. When the race sucks, it's really hard to feel the sense of accomplishment that we otherwise would. And especially when we see all the other people celebrating, all the other people with their big wins and successes and that sort of thing. But we have to remember that there's a lot of people at every single race who don't have the best day ever, right? I don't know. I mean, I have no idea what the statistics would be, but I would love to see some statistics on this. Like, if you take one of the average marathons or you compile a bunch of data from different marathons, if you know this research, if you're like listening to this and you're like, oh, Steph, like that's my area of expertise, I know all the numbers, like let me know. What percentage of runners, cross that finish line and had like a spectacular day, PR, like best race ever, loving life, and what percentage are like, huh, okay, well, better luck next time or don't finish, that kind of thing. But I want you to think about everything that led you to even get to that start line, right? Because it's incredibly hard when we don't reach a goal to put so much pressure on that end result and that final like destination of reaching that goal. But the reality is, we need to feel a tremendous sense of accomplishment, not just for getting to the finish line faster than we've ever got to the finish line before, but for showing up, even if, especially if the training cycle was kind of bad. Maybe you got injured, maybe you got sick, maybe you had just like craziness happen with work and you were traveling or moving or, someone in your family passed away, or maybe you lost a pet or, and these are all things that I'm just kind of coming out with right now. I mean, these are all things that have happened to clients of mine. I mean, I can, in the last calendar year, right? I can think of all these situations that people that I've directly worked with, clients of mine, have been through. And guess what? Every single one of them still showed up for their race. Yes, they all happened to finish their events. I didn't have any, I don't have any DNFs on my roster this past year. But like all of this adversity and all of these challenges and barriers and things that come up, everyone goes through that. And what we have to remember is that there are a lot of people that don't even show up to the race, right? They have an injury or work gets busy or like they get sick or like whatever happens, all these things, and they quit, right? They stop showing up. And you didn't, right? Even though the race wasn't your best day, all of the time that you spent, all of the energy you spent showing up for yourself and getting to that start line is a huge thing and a huge thing that I want you to celebrate no matter what actually happened when you were out there. And I know this is hard in the moment when you're just feeling that sense of loss or that sense of disappointment. And believe me, like I have been there, right? I have followed bad training advice and had a crappy time out there. I've done things wrong. I've made mistakes. I've underfueled. I've underhydrated. I've undertrained. Like I've been injured. Like, right. I mean, I've been through it all, right? I've been running for well over 10 years at this point. Like if it's happened to you, it's happened to me. But, we have to think like, yes, okay, only 1% of the world runs marathons. And think of all the people that sign up, start, think maybe they're going to try, and then they don't even get to that start line, right? There's going to be a chunk of people that's true for. So I want you to celebrate. I want you to be proud of yourself and have that sense of accomplishment of what you did to even get there, and have that be enough sometimes, right? Even if it wasn't a PR day. If it was, great. Even more reason to celebrate, right? I am super thrilled for you. I love when anybody gets a PR, when anyone has a good day, when anyone reaches their goals, no matter what those goals are. I especially love when my clients get those goals and I reach those goals. I get to celebrate with them. It's all wonderful. But I just want you to know that if that's not your story, and that won't always be your story, that you have that 10 out of 10 event, it's okay. And you're still a worthy runner. Your goals are still achievable. Your goals are still within your reach. So after that, after the initial, kind of celebration and just processing a little bit of those feelings and remembering your accomplishments, the second thing that we really need to make sure we're doing is keeping moving, especially after a longer event, half marathon or a marathon or an ultra. Keep it moving, keep the blood flowing in your legs. Try not to sit down or stop moving too quickly. You want to give yourself like, an extra 10, 15 minutes of kind of walking around. Just to stop you from either totally cramping up, stiffening up, or sitting down and not being able to stand again. I always think about the scene from How I Met Your Mother when Barney runs the New York City Marathon and he goes and gets on the subway afterwards and then he can't get off and his legs stop working. Anyway, and then refueling and rehydrating. So making sure you're drinking lots of fluids, having a recovery meal that includes protein and carbohydrates. Whatever they're handing out at the finish line is probably going to get you part of the way there. Certainly if they're giving out like bananas, bagels, the marathon that I always run here, the Manitoba Marathon in June, they usually are giving out popsicles, which is fantastic. Little bags of potato chips and bagels and chocolate milk and, whatever else, protein shakes, you name it. So, making sure that you are taking some food, you are taking some fluids, especially if you don't feel like it. And I can't stress this enough. If you end that race and you're feeling kind of nauseous, maybe a little lightheaded, the last thing that you want to put into your body is food or fluids. This is a time when you need food and fluids the absolute very most. So even if you are not feeling up to it and you are like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine, take something, get it in your system, get it in your stomach. Start with fluids, take it easy, maybe an electrolyte drink, a little bit of chocolate milk or something like that, if that's okay. But a popsicle, to me, there's absolutely nothing better than a popsicle. But having something that you can start those recovery processes, start rehydrating, start bringing your body temperature down, because that is going to help you feel better much more quickly. If you don't eat and drink because you don't feel like eating and drinking, it's going to just delay you feeling good enough to eat and drink. So I can't stress that enough. Really, really important, especially if you're feeling icky afterwards. Get something in as soon as possible and just be consistent, right? We're not talking about like glug, 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 a whole bunch of stuff that potentially is going to come back up, but to just be sipping and just continually be putting little bits in, because I promise you will feel better so much faster if you make that a priority. Okay, number 3, the third thing is to give yourself a little bit of time to process the emotions around the race. And this is good or bad, right? Like this is if you had a great day, amazing, you were on cloud 9, got your PR, or got your BQ, like whatever it might be, whatever your goal was for that day, you nailed it. It's fantastic. Everything is coming up roses, right? Give yourselves just some time to just enjoy that, right? Enjoy those feelings, enjoy the positivity, celebrate, however you want to celebrate, whatever that means for you, right? If things didn't go to plan and you do have a sense of disappointment about the event, give yourself some time to just process those emotions. And I want you to give yourself a little bit of time to process and a little bit of time to kind of like go through the emotional roller coaster and all of that before you sit down and actually do your race debrief. Because if you do it right away, like immediately, your thoughts and your feedback and everything can be very heavily painted by the emotional charge that you're feeling about that race. And so if you happened to have a good day, even though there were a lot of challenges, difficulties, whatever, you may gloss over those, maybe not really recognize those, and not plan for those or plan around those things for next time if you happen to have a good day that day, you know? And you see this a lot with people with fueling, right? Where they have a good performance, they have a solid day, maybe they get a PR, whatever, but they didn't really eat and drink during a race. Right. And so they're going to walk away from that thinking, well, I guess I don't really need to, right? Maybe fueling during a race is a bunch of bogus. But there's lots of things that go into us getting a PR. And especially if we're a newer runner, just simply putting the time into training and just showing up again and again and again, we're probably going to get pretty far, even if our fueling or our hydration is not optimal. There's also a huge difference between different race distances, right? And, this may be dietitian hot take that maybe I shouldn't be like sharing my deepest, darkest dietitian secrets. But like, the reality is, you can do a pretty bad job of fueling and hydrating for a half marathon and still get through that half marathon and maybe get through that half marathon in pretty good form, right? The faster your race time, the less time you're going to be out there running, the less fuel and hydration you need, right? Like if you're running for an hour and a half, right? If you're a pretty solid half marathoner that's out there for 90 minutes, right? Like you can do a good job or you can do a pretty bad job of fueling and hydrating in 90 minutes and still get where you want to go. Now, if you're someone who's running a half marathon in 2.5 hours and it's a hot day, right? 2.5 hours, big difference. And you're going to really struggle with those final couple of miles if you're dehydrated after running with no fluids or minimal fluids for 2.5 hours. Same goes, maybe you are a pretty solid half marathoner and your fuel and fluid approach has worked for you and a half. You can't necessarily copy and paste that bad nutrition plan to a full marathon, right? Because now you're going to be out there for more than double the length of time. And so what you maybe can get away with for an hour and a half or 2 hours, now when we're looking at 4 or maybe even 4.5 hours, that's not going to work. And that's going to slow you down tremendously, right? So just because you did have a good day doesn't mean that everything is perfect and you should do it exactly that way for next time. And then, of course, same goes if you didn't have a great day, right? If the race didn't go to plan, if you immediately sit down to do that race debrief session and you are in a real negative headspace about it, you're in a real funk about it, you're probably going to paint a lot of things with a negative brush that maybe don't deserve to be painted that way, right? You might place some really harsh judgments on yourself, place some really harsh judgments on maybe a coach that you were working with or someone else because you're just feeling really bad about what the end result was, right? So give yourself that space, that time to process the emotions, get through that roller coaster so you can sit down and maybe think a bit more logically and less emotionally as you're doing that race debrief. When I was preparing for this episode, obviously a big part of it was this race debrief session. But as I was, kind of in the midst of planning to write this episode and then record it, I got an email. I don't know if any of you guys are on the email list for Steve Magnus and his email newsletter. This was a couple of weeks ago, but that particular one, he talks about the 48-hour rule. And he says the 48-hour rule is essentially this, time to process and then get back to work. Now, the 48 hours is not like a magical number, right? It's not a hard and fast 48 hours. So it's not like you only get 2 days or you have to take 2 days, right? Depending on the race and kind of what the stakes were for that particular event. And getting back into it, getting back to focusing is not getting back to hard training, right? We're not saying 48 hours after your marathon, like, chin up, get back to work and start training for your next event. I actually don't want you to sign up for another race too soon. Again, because we need to go through this process of reflecting on the whole journey from start to finish and then identifying what do we want to do differently next time. And so if we're constantly racing back to back to back to back and never giving us a little bit of time and space to actually try new, different approaches, to actually see if new, different things work, if we're just getting out there, month after month, every month we're doing another big race, we don't have time to try anything, right? We're always getting out there gunning for that PR, trying to improve our times, and we've never actually taken a step back and gone through this whole mapped out this whole process to see what can we maybe shift months before the marathon, starting with changes that we're making way far away from the actual race date that can actually move the needle and get us closer to our goal. So the 48-hour concept, I really like it, but I want you to instead think about giving yourself that time to process the emotions. Again, whether that's good or bad, and then to sit down and refocus and start planning next steps, right? Not diving right back into training, not putting another race on the calendar unless maybe it is 6 to 12 months out, but to actually stop and think, okay, what is next for me? What do I need to shift and change? What was working well? Do I want to keep? And where do I need help? Right? Where are the places that maybe I do need to connect with a professional to work specifically on the challenges that I'm having, right? Some of the things that come up in your race debrief session are going to be very clear and very easy for you to fix on your own, right? There might be certain things like needing to run more volume, or maybe needing to run less volume, maybe getting more sleep, setting better boundaries with work, or whatever it might be to protect your time to run and recover, and those sorts of things. Maybe you know a pretty good amount about nutrition. You just need to actually implement what you know about nutrition. There might be some things that you're like, well, I'm not really sure why this didn't work. I don't really know what went wrong. I don't really know why this happened the way that it did. I don't understand, right? I have questions. I have frustrations. There are unanswered things about how this all went down. And this is where you can identify who are the people that I can connect with that can help me answer these questions, get the information and the resources that I need so that I can reach my goals next time. So when we go into the actual race debrief session, set aside a little bit of time for this. I think to do this really well, it's going to take at least 20 minutes. So, you can turn off your phone, put it aside. You can turn on some nice music. You can pour yourself a nice warm cup of tea or coffee, or I don't know if it's after 5 o'clock, maybe a glass of wine, doesn't matter. Do whatever you want to do, but set aside a little bit of time to just reflect on this, think through this, focus on it so that it actually gets done. And that it isn't like kind of I did part of it, answered a few questions, kind of thought about it, left it to the side, got distracted sort of thing. So really try to make it a priority. Now, we're going to start all the way back at the beginning of your training cycle, right? This is not just a race debrief in that we're looking just at like what happened on the day during the race, good and bad, right? That's part of it, absolutely. Like our actual execution of the race day plan is super important. But we need to go all the way back to the beginning of that training cycle, right? How did we feel? What shape were we in? What was our mileage like? What was our strength like? Were we coming off an injury, coming out of a pregnancy, like coming out of 10 years of not running, right? Whatever it might be. How were we at the beginning of this training cycle, right? What was our mindset? What was our physical preparedness and readiness to get into this training cycle? Because if you go from, I'm doing a base of 30 miles a week and I'm going to get into a marathon training cycle. That's very different than being like, I'm going to sign up for this marathon and I am currently not running because I just had a baby. Two very different scenarios, even though those two runners might ultimately be following a very similar approach to training. Maybe have similar experience, previous history with running, that sort of thing, maybe the same age, same gender, what have you, but you're in a very different position going into that training cycle compared to someone else, right? We have to remember that and just keep it in mind to avoid being too judgmental and harsh on ourselves when we're comparing to others, which we should never do, but we all do it anyway. So we just need to keep these things in mind. And even if you're comparing to a previous version of yourself, right? Oh, I used to get ready for a race in 12 to 16 weeks, no problem, and did really well. Now it's taken me, I did the same training plan that I did 7 years ago. And in the meantime, I had two babies And all of a sudden, that same training plan didn't get me the same place that it did when I was running 30 miles a week going into it, right? Okay, right? These are things that we can think through, things that we can reflect on that can really help fuel future decision making and understanding all the things that went into our race day performance. So we want to think about the training cycle. Did we do the right amount and types of workouts that we needed to do? For example, I mentioned, earlier in this episode, I've had some real stinkers of races myself, of course. And one of them, I know that the problem was I just wasn't running enough. I had followed advice from a source that was not right for me, and I was not running as much as I should have been. My long runs were not as long as they should have been. And yeah, I had a crappy day. It was, I mean, certainly one of my slower half marathons because I just hadn't run enough, right? Nutrition, of course, during your training cycle, during your carb loading, during your race, thinking through all the different phases of nutrition that you went through, recovery, tapering. If you traveled to a race, how was that, right? Did it go well? Or was it a total gong show? Did your flight arrive on time? Did you get crampy and uncomfortable on a long flight or in the car? Did you travel across like 75 time zones to get where you were going, right? Like for all the people that went to Sydney this past summer, well, it was winter in Sydney, but summer for us here in the Northern Hemisphere, right? Like that's a lot of added stress and logistics and all of these things that are very different from just like rolling out of bed and heading down to your local event, the one that you run every year that like starts down the street from your house. Did you have enough time when you woke up to get to the start line? Were you really rushed and really stressed, right? Going through like every step of the logistics, every step of what you did, how your nutrition was, how your pacing was, like all of these things, making notes on them is just, again, so helpful to be able to more accurately compare race to race, right? To understand like, oh yeah, you know what? My performance at this event wasn't quite my usual, but I was super jet lagged, or maybe it was like higher elevation than other races that I've done. Maybe it was more hilly than other races that I've done. Getting into all that stuff just so it's not a matter of like, did I PR? Yes or no? And that's all we hinge it on, right? Because there's so much more that goes into good performances and building us as runners than just always needs to be faster, needs to be faster, needs to be faster. Right? And sometimes you might be really proud of just getting to the start line of that race. Like I mentioned before, just showing up for yourself, being consistent, right? If you had a really rocky training cycle and you didn't reach your goals for that race because of how things went in training, like showing up on race day is a huge win in and of itself because a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't even get that far. Other times you might have had a really solid training cycle, right? You might have really felt good about how the training went. And then on race day, it didn't come together. This might be, maybe you need more training, more volume, right? More miles, or maybe it's the right training. Maybe you need more specific strategies, more specific workouts to actually get you to where you want to go with your goals. What happened during the race, right? With your pacing? Were you just unable to hang on to your goal pace once you got there? Did you go way too fast? Were you not prepared for the hills? Was it really hot outside? Like, what were all the different factors? Was it your fitness? Was it the heat, fuel, fluids, something else entirely? I had a client earlier this year who just like got a really nasty head cold not long before her marathon. Oh, no, this is last fall. Anyway, I think she ended up having a really good day anyway because of it. I'm thinking back a year, so I don't remember all the exact details. This story just kind of came into my mind. But she like just you have to adjust expectations sometimes and just understand why different things happen. I had another client very recently who ran her very first marathon after training most of the spring and summer with me as her coach. And, she ended up getting a COVID infection like 3 weeks before her marathon. And like she almost didn't run it. She almost switched down to doing the half marathon instead. And this is such a good story. I really need to get her on the podcast to tell her story about this first marathon and everything she went to getting ready for this first marathon. But she almost didn't even start. And then she did. And I know she was so grateful that she did. And I was so glad that she did because I knew she'd be able to finish even if it wasn't the race she expected to run that day and the performance she expected to have, because she had come down and missed, the very kind of final, couple training runs in her calendar, which she had done the majority of it already, right? Like she had already put in so much work, so many long runs, so many miles, all of that. It just kind of, really hampered things in the final few weeks. But again, just that mindset and that mentality around it. And then, of course, how was your sleep going into the final days before the race? How was your stress, right? Were you traveling? Were you sick? Did you have flight delays? I had another client who, for him, his shoes, he had his shoes, either he didn't pack them, he didn't remember to pack them, or the airline lost his luggage when he was flying down for his race, something like that, right? These things happen and you're trying to find shoes the day before and it's like craziness and all of that. So then identifying, where do you need help, right? What questions remain unanswered about your race experience? And what are things that are still frustrating you, maybe despite having gone through this whole process? You're like, I don't know what happened. I still don't understand, right? Connecting with the right professionals and connecting with the right people who can help answer those questions. Look at all this data, right? Review all these notes that you've made and help you identify, okay, these are some things that we can work on. Here's the workouts that you need in order to build the fitness you need to reach your goal. Here's the nutrition plan or the hydration strategy that you need to be running on a hot day that's going to help you get to the end of that race without fading and, being at risk of severe dehydration. And I want you to do all of this before you go and sign up for your next race, right? To give yourself a little bit of time, a little bit of space to actually make these adjustments, make these shifts. So we're not just, again, like repeating history and doing the same thing and getting us into the same problem and having the same challenges over and over again. Like, let's hit the reset button. Let's actually fix it. And then we can start to actually work on those long-term goals and get closer and closer to reaching them. Understanding that it might take you a little bit longer than you expect to get to some of those big running goals, right? The thing you want to achieve with your running might not be something that you can actually achieve in a single training cycle. I had seen a question on my social media just recently, maybe it was even today before I recorded this podcast episode, somebody wanting to shave an hour off of their marathon time. And the marathon is 19 weeks away or something like that. Now, I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible in a single training cycle to run an hour faster in a marathon, because it really depends on the past marathon. Like, what happened? What was your training like? Your nutrition? Like, there's a lot of things, right? You might be able to, depending on the timeline and depending on a lot of factors, run an hour faster in a subsequent marathon. But that might not be something, right? Like if you've been training for a long time, you've been running consistently and you're doing a lot of right things, an hour in a single training cycle is right. That's lofty. That's a lofty goal. That might be more of a longer term goal, right? Again, you very well could get there. Absolutely. I believe that you can get there. You just might not get there this year, this calendar year, right? So I hope that you found this episode helpful. I hope that it helped you, think about how you can have a really effective post-race debrief session. And I hope it helped you understand all the different things that I want you to think through and that you should be thinking through to understand how you can continue to make progress and build towards your long-term running goals. This resource, a race day debrief resource, is actually something that I have inside the Fuel Train Recover Club for my members of that program. So it actually includes all of these questions, has all of these instructions, all of the different things that you can think through, and some more help and guidance for what to do after your race. So this is one of the many, many resources that are included as part of that program. And if you're really looking for an online program as a runner that gives you all the things that you need, training plans that are totally customizable, expert coaching from myself, dietitian support, nutrition help with understanding your dietary needs, doing an in-depth dietary analysis, getting personalized meal plans and recipes, as well as coaching. Both one-on-one coaching is available, and we get together once a month for a live group session and answer some Q&A. All of those things are included inside the Fuel Train Recover Club, and enrollment is open right now. So if this sounds about like what you're looking for, you want a friendly atmosphere, a supportive coaching environment, and somebody who can get into these details with you, someone who can help you uncover where you're stuck, where your challenges are, and get you a plan that actually moves you forward with your running, I would love to help and love to be your coach. I'd love to have you join me inside the Fuel Train Recover Club. If one-on-one coaching is more your style, if you're the runner who wants a really hands-on, really personalized approach, I do also take on a small number of one-on-one clients each season. My one-on-one programs include, of course, a fully customized running plan created by myself, fully customized nutrition plan, right down to utilizing your genetics and incorporating your genes into those nutrition requirements and into your training strategies. And of course, we would have regular one-on-one appointments to meet and chat and, answer all your questions and give you that one-on-one support that you're looking for. So lots of different options for working with me, both in a group setting that also does have lots of customized one-on-one capacity, as well as in my one-on-one programs. And if you want to get started right now looking at your fueling strategy, then I would love for you to start by taking my free fueling audit for runners. So this free fueling audit is a very quick checklist, takes you less than 5 minutes to get through. I promise. If it takes you more than 5 minutes, you're overthinking it. Don't overthink it. Just, go with your gut, go with what comes to mind. Quick 5-minute checklist, yes or no questions to assess how you're doing with your nutrition. How are you doing with your fueling? Helps you identify where you might be struggling with your eating as a runner, where poor nutrition might be holding you back, and of course, gives you the steps to get started on fixing your fueling. So you can find the links to all of these things that I mentioned in the show notes. And again, if you're looking for some help, I would love to help you and get you started on the path to better running. All right, that's it for this week's episode. I really hope you found it helpful. Thank you so much for tuning in with me today. We'll catch you back here next week. Bye for now.
The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used or relied upon for diagnosis or treatment of any health condition. This information does not create a client-practitioner relationship and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice.